Rodriguez, and the title of this presentation, brought to you by Puzzlebox Academy, is titled Behavioral Momentum. Behavioral momentum is driven by two questions that are asked by lots of parents. The first one is, how do I motivate my child to do something they don't want to do? The second question, or could be phrased as, how do I get my child to comply with a hard or undesirable request? And the magic words are behavioral momentum. Now, behavioral momentum, it's not magic, it's actually science. It's science that's derived by the early works of Dr. B.F. Skinner in the 1930s and 40s. It's one of the core principles and procedures that we use in applied behavior analysis. Now, it's not magic, but some people, when they start utilizing it, think it's magic because it works, and it works really, really well if you do it right and you do it systematically. So I'm going to unravel what is behavioral momentum and how to apply it. Now, first, again, it's not magic, it's science. Now, behavioral momentum refers to the tendency for behavior to persist following a change in environmental conditions. So the greater the rate of reinforcement, the greater the behavioral momentum. Now, that's a lot of jargon from our science. We're going to unravel this in more simplistic words, but understanding that behavioral momentum is really about how behavior happens because of a conditional change in the environment, and there's a lot of reinforcement that happens before we get to that ultimate behavior that we want. Now, to break it down, what is behavioral momentum all about? It's all about achieving compliance. There's something we want the child to do, and more often it's something that they don't want to do. So we're looking for compliance where normally we would get non-compliance. How we achieve compliance through behavioral momentum is by using a sequence of asks. Now, the sequence of asks are that they will very likely get compliance. They're called high probability commands, meaning they're asks that are something that the child would do normally. They would do it very willingly, and they have the ability to do it. So we do a sequence of asks before the ultimate ask of the low probability ask. And why does this work? It works in a word, reinforcement. So let's break it down in other words. The child does the hard thing because by doing some easy things first, getting reinforcement for the easy things, then doing the hard thing and getting reinforcement for that hard thing. I love breaking it down this way, right? Because ultimately that's what behavioral momentum is all about. It's all about reinforcing all of those small, easy things that they do normally, and then getting to that point of that hard thing that they don't want to do. And they'll do it because that reinforcement is built up, meaning there has been momentum of reinforcement that the child has experienced. And therefore, once they get to that hard ask, they're more willing to do that or more apt to do that because they understand that reinforcement is a matter of getting that hard thing done and getting the reinforcement that they want. So think about it that way. When you're thinking about those two questions, right? How do I get my child to do something they don't want to do? Or how do I get my child to comply to something that's difficult for them to do? Go into behavioral momentum mode. Think of those many easy things first that they would do. Reinforce those easy things and then get to that hard thing. Don't forget that reinforcement. So let's unravel. Let's use a couple of examples. So one example comes from some most recent literature around oral health care. And so this was about children that was going into the dentist and looking to get their teeth clean, dental work clean, and they didn't really like doing that. They didn't want to get that oral health care. So in order to do that, they set up a number of different scenarios and situations using behavioral momentum, like getting the kid in the car, getting the kid out of the car, getting them to sit in the dentist's office, getting them to sit in that dental chair, getting them to just smile in front of the dentist. All of these easy things that the child could do, and then reinforcing each one of those steps, ultimately to the point where the dentist was putting their tools into the child's mouth and being able to examine and do some cleaning. Took several iterations, right? Took several rounds to get them there. Behavioral momentum, it does work. It's a science, but it was applied very systematically, ultimately to achieve that oral health care for that child. Another one that we use very often in Puzzle Box Academy is appropriate sitting duration. A lot of our children in our schools, they just don't sit very long. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Like, these are long durations for them to sit and sit appropriately, right? So a lot of times what we do is a lot of behavioral momentum to get them there. So we just have them sit for a little while, then we reinforce that. Then maybe we sit them down in a different chair in a different way, doing a different task. Again, behavioral momentum. So the behavioral momentum of just sitting appropriately sometimes is necessary, meaning maybe they don't want to sit and they fuss about sitting at all. So maybe our behavioral momentum is to get them to even get to a chair, stand next to a chair, sit on a chair, and then ultimately sit appropriately on the chair. So sometimes those long durations of appropriate sitting, that has to wait. We just got to get them in the chair first. And we use behavioral momentum to do that. And then finally, some of you may be familiar with our methodologies of discrete trial instructions, or discrete trial teaching, or DTT for short. This is an ABA methodology for us to really advance skills and skill acquisition. So what we do with behavioral momentum is sometimes our children, our clients, they don't want to sit still, right? Your kids may not want to sit still to do work or to look at different shapes and colors and numbers and things like that to really work on their skill sets. They may just not want to do that. So sometimes we have to apply behavioral momentum to get them to do the hard task, right? By doing simple things that we know that they're willing to do, whether it's a high five or a clapping of their hands, or doing the old game Simon Says, touch your head, touch your ears, touch your eyes, touch your nose, do the task, right? So a lot of times these easy things that these kids will be willing to do and more capable of doing, and again, willing to do, we reinforce those simple things all the way to that hard thing. Now, the cool thing about behavioral momentum is that the reinforcement is what builds the momentum. See, the child is likely to follow directions because they are getting reinforced for easy behaviors first. Now, from a psychological standpoint, when we think about what's the outcome of all of this, what is it, what's in it for the kid, it reduces a lot of frustration levels because the students, they're having success on easy tasks, so they're getting a lot of reinforcement, but ultimately they're also building their skill set and they're achieving all of these good things. So they're less frustrated. Their frustration levels to get to that harder thing is not so high anymore, and they're increasing that likelihood that they will try harder behaviors in the future. So behavioral momentum is a really interesting part of our science because we're giving all this reinforcement for all this easy stuff, but when it gets to that hard stuff, they get reinforced for that, and then later it's not so hard and they can tackle harder things down the road. So that's what builds behavioral momentum. It's really reinforcement. Reinforcement is what builds that momentum. So what kind of behaviors can you use behavioral momentum for? Well, I want you to think about your child for a minute. Some of these, maybe all of these apply, or maybe none of these apply. But kind of consider your own child as I go through these type of behaviors. These behaviors, we do behavioral momentum with the kids in Puzzle Box Academy. So things like transitions, going from one classroom to another classroom, going from one part of the clinic to the other part of the clinic. Maybe it's a transition from one activity to another activity. Those transitions are really huge, and sometimes we need to build a little behavioral momentum to get them from the one activity they might like a lot to one activity they don't like at all. Cleaning your room. Cleaning room is, for some kids, a really daunting task. My 9-year-old son, for example, he abhors cleaning his room, and sometimes his cleaning his room is actually takes him a lot longer to do than it should because he just has so much to clean. And so I utilize behavioral momentum with my own son when it comes to cleaning his room, getting him to clean certain things or do certain things that is easy for him to do, like putting his clothes in his laundry basket versus making his bed or organizing or reorganizing his drawers. So all of those kind of things are some, I got to recognize what's the easy things for him to do versus the harder things to do and utilize behavioral momentum to get him there. So cleaning your room is another one. Brushing teeth. Now, brushing teeth, we use other methodologies such as shaping or chaining, which can be covered at a later time. But behavioral momentum, if your child knows how to brush their teeth or brush them well, like using flossing, for example, behavioral momentum could be the strategy to use. So, for example, it might be really easy for them to put the toothpaste on the toothbrush. It might be easy for them to hold the toothpaste with the toothbrush and start scrubbing the front of their teeth. But getting to the back of their teeth or flossing or all those things might be a little bit more harder. So a lot of reinforcement along the way for brushing teeth. Eating vegetables. Now, eating vegetables, there's another methodology called PREMAC principle. And this is one of those where you would give them tell them they can have their dessert, for example, as a reward if they eat their vegetables. So if you eat your vegetables, then you can get your dessert. And that would be the utilization of PREMAC principle. However, let's say eating vegetables is just a very difficult thing for them to do or something they don't want to do. There's no motivation for it, and that reinforcement is just not powerful enough. Behavioral momentum could get you there. So, for example, sitting at the table, talking about their favorite video game, talking about something that they're looking forward to in the near future, like a vacation or something. Giving them reinforcement for doing things that easy for them to do, like talking or having a bite of their favorite side dish or their favorite part of the meal, for example. Even giving you a smile or a high five or a hug could be the behavioral momentum they need to get to that difficult one of complying to eating their vegetables. So try to build some behavioral momentum when it comes to things like eating vegetables. It works. Doing homework is another one, and I find that doing homework, there's kind of levels of homework. So there's easy homework, there's difficult homework, and there's homework in between. So I utilize behavioral momentum with my own children when it comes to doing homework. Get them to do the easy things first, reinforce that. Then get them to do the medium level, easy, moderate to hard. Get them to do that, and then get them to do the hard things first. Now, that's contrary to some people's philosophy. They think do the hard things first and then do the easy things. But with my kids, I find that if I get them to do the hard things first, they're exhausted, they're burnt out, their brain is mush. So I use behavioral momentum to get them to the hard thing because otherwise they just don't want to do it. So kind of unique strategies in that regards. And one that I found to be very interesting in our kind of day and age of technology is spending time with the family. So, for example, I have a teenager who loves to be on her cell phone and be on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. And sometimes we have the family coming over, and her idea of spending time with the family is sitting on the couch watching her YouTube or TikToks while the family's there. So I utilize behavioral momentum with her with regards to, getting our family together and spending time with the family. So it's easy for us to just take the phone away and make it kind of a negative consequence, right, that experience. But sometimes it's just as easy as saying, hey, put the phone down, put the phone down, face down. She'll do that. Put the phone down for a couple of minutes. Okay, she'll do that. Reinforce with access to the phone, right? Then we build some momentum and say, okay, no phone while they're visiting, and she'll comply. So the harder thing is being without the phone at all, right? And so we try to delay that consequence by building in the reinforcement of just complying with what we want, which is just spending time with the family. And that works, and it's amazing how it works, and it helps everybody out. It's less frustrating for her as she eases into letting go of the phone for long periods of time. It's less frustrating for us, and again, we get that compliance, which is ultimately what we're working for. So if none of these behaviors match anything that you're kind of thinking about or working on with your child, just think of any behavior that has a history of escape or avoidance, meaning they just don't want to do it. They escape it at all costs, or they avoid it at all costs because it's too difficult, it's unpreferred, it's a behavior they just don't want to do. There's a lack of motivation to do it. That's a behavior that you can apply behavioral momentum. Now, When it comes to behavioral momentum, we talk about it in terms of high probability behaviors, meaning things that a child easily will do that we can use and reinforce and build upon towards getting those high in improbability behaviors, right? So those least things they don't want to do. So we found over time, this is from a good research, good ABA literature, that these are some effective high probability behaviors like a high five or jump up and down, clap your hands, spin around, wiggle your fingers, touch your nose, stomp your feet, touch your toes, right? The old kind of Simon Says approach, right? Without the Simon Says. But all of these little behaviors, especially for younger kids, it really works. It builds their momentum. They're reinforced by the, yeah, good job, high five, jump up and down, way to go. And even just that social praise is reinforcement enough. And we use those small behaviors, simple behaviors, easy to apply, easy to do for them, reinforce those towards getting to that more difficult behavior like cleaning your room. Now, there are some high probability behaviors that we would call ineffective, like homework. So even like easy homework, unless our goal is to get to that harder homework assignment, doing easy homework is probably not very high probability towards cleaning their room, because then they're doing homework and then they're doing another chore. So to them, it's like double work. So that's probably pretty ineffective. Another one is reading a book. See, reading a book takes time. There's a lot of effort to it. There's reading comprehension. There's things like that. And so that's not what we're talking about here. That doesn't build a lot of behavioral momentum because you got to wait till they're done reading the book. And I don't know about your kids, but I know my kids, when it comes to reading a book, it doesn't take very long before they're done. Another one is like watching a video, which is similar to reading a book. It takes time to watch a video. And watching a video engages them for that moment in time, but it doesn't get them to that delayed behavior, compliance behavior that we're looking for, right? Because then it's going to take more time. Behavioral momentum is those quick, easy things that we can reinforce towards getting to that ultimate behavior that we want them to comply with. So watching a video is a pretty ineffective, high probability behavior, meaning they'll probably watch a video, but it's not going to help us build momentum. And the last one is cleaning your room. To me, growing up, cleaning my room was pretty easy because my room was always clean. My mom may or may not agree with me on that, but I think so. But cleaning my room was not a high probability behavior that was effective for me, and it's not for most kids because, again, it takes time. So if they clean their room, that's usually the thing that we want them to do to comply with, but it's not the easiest thing to do. So we need those other effective high probability behaviors to get us there. So hopefully this kind of list is helpful to understand the difference between effective high probability behaviors, or those simple behaviors, I put that in quotes, versus kind of the ineffective ones. Now, an interesting question about behavioral momentum. If you think about what we're talking about, behavioral momentum is about building momentum using reinforcement of simple or easy or highly preferred activities or behaviors to do towards getting compliance to something we don't want to do. Well, I don't know about you, but as an adult, there's a lot of things I don't want to do as an adult. And there are things I delay myself to doing. And so behavioral momentum works for me as well as in my adult life. So the question is, can you use behavioral momentum on yourself as an adult? And the answer is absolutely yes. So let's think of some examples. So exercise. Now, exercise requires a lot of momentum for some people. Getting to the gym, getting ready to go to the gym, getting everything ready to be at the gym, getting started, doing exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3. So a lot of times people just have to encourage themselves and build, and sometimes it's natural behavioral momentum, right? So they get themselves started and do the little things first. For me, sometimes the first simple thing is just putting it on the calendar that I'm going to the gym, and I reinforce myself for just getting it on my calendar. The second thing I do that reinforces myself is just getting dressed to go to the gym. I've actually gotten dressed to go to the gym and not gone to the gym, but I've reinforced myself for at least getting dressed to go to the gym. I know that sounds kind of strange, but you got to build that momentum, right? And so ultimately, by doing so, when I get dressed, the next thing, if I want reinforcement, right? If I want that kind of social praise from my wife or my kids or even myself, right? My own positive reinforcement, I need to get to the gym. Then when I get to the gym, if I ultimately want the hardest thing to do, which is about a 45-minute good workout, right? I need to make sure I'm building some momentum. So reinforcing every couple of minutes or every 5 minutes or every workout. I give myself some reinforcement, whether it's an acknowledgement to myself or letting my wife know, hey, I just knocked out this exercise or this exercise, right? All of that reinforcement builds, right? And that's what establishes that momentum to getting that ultimate compliance of what you don't want. For me, the ultimate compliance at the gym happens to be the elliptical machine. It's not my favorite thing, but that's the hardest thing that I need to get done. So when I get to that point, I build so much reinforcement, I'm ready to knock it out of the park. Another example for adults is paying bills. There are certain bills that require more math, more calculations, more moving money around from one account to another account to pay it off. So some of those bills that take more time, more energy, more effort, and ultimately you don't want to pay, you got to build some behavioral momentum for that too. So pay the easy bills, right? You knock those out of the park. Good. Now you got that bill paid. You got that bill paid. You got this bill paid, this bill paid, this bill paid. And then all of a sudden you're at that one bill that you don't want to do, but you built so much reinforcement for it, you're more likely to do it. And then the last one I came up with, in terms of adult life is having those tough conversations, whether it's with a friend, a parent, a family member, or your significant other, right? Having tough conversations sometimes are hard things to do. And there's not a whole lot of reinforcement if you just try to get it done, right? If you just have those tough conversations. So I find behavioral momentum is an effective strategy for having tough conversations. So having simple conversations reinforced by good conversations. Have another simple conversation. Have another maybe moderate level conversation, and then having the tough conversation. If you do it right, you build so much behavioral momentum in the conversations and enough reinforcement that when you have the tough conversation, it's actually a really good tough conversation. So yes, you too can use behavioral momentum on your own behavior as well. That concludes this monthly parent training on behavioral momentum. My name is Dr. Manny Rodriguez. If you do have any questions, you are more than welcome to email me at manuelr@thepeacefits.com. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or listen to any comments you have about behavioral momentum or any topic on applied behavior analysis. Until next time, thank you for joining me and have a good day.